Welcome. Before retiring from the practice of medicine, David Manigault started volunteering at the Dayton Bluffs Preserve. Over time, he then became certified as an Illinois Extension Master Naturalist and assumed the duties of volunteer coordinator at the preserve. In that role, David helps coordinate the workdays of volunteers who are involved in the removal of invasive species, collection, processing and dispersal of seed, development and maintenance of trails, and organizing prescribed burns. He has also coordinated the restoration of an abandoned cholera pioneer cemetery site. Chris Wolche started out years ago managing at Pizzo Nursery. This is where he first learned about native plants and ecological restoration. It was through his study of native plants in LaSalle County that he discovered remnant populations of plants and began to create a native prairie on his own property. Several years later, he became involved in volunteering at Dayton Bluffs Preserve, and through connections with people and multiple volunteer opportunities, Chris learned much about restoration when developing a new area. He loves being involved with the Conservation Foundation and activities related to citizen science projects. Chris leads hikes, gives talks about native plants, and since becoming a Master Naturalist in 24, has sat on the citizen science panel at their Master Naturalist Conference. So help me tonight in welcoming the dynamic duo of Dayton Bluff Preserves, David Manigault and Chris Wolche.
I didn't feel so, is it on? Good. I didn't feel so good after following the Caterpillar movie, but after that introduction, I'm feeling pretty whole right now. So I want to thank you for welcoming us and inviting us to come here this evening. Chris and I both said this is the biggest, the audiovisual, the number of people, so we're really under a lot of pressure here this evening to perform. So we were tasked with these things here. First of all, yeah, so you've introduced me, but yes, I'm a retired physician, and this is my second career. And I'm memorizing Latin names, but for different parts of the anatomy, I guess I would have to say. But Kathy asked us to tell you about the Dayton Bluffs, and some of you are going to come join us in a week or two. How many plan to come? Good. And tell Kathy if you want the full tour, which is up and down, or if you want kind of a lower level kind of a tour, please. So how did the Dayton Bluffs come about? What have we done to make it a public place? What are some of the plant species that are found there? And by the way, I found that there's about 14 of the things I'm going to talk about tonight that are on your plant list on our wetlands. What types of natural areas are represented at the preserve? So I hope to fill the bill there. History of the Dayton Bluffs goes back to 1999 when the Illinois Natural Areas Inventory was done by the INAI to find areas that they wanted to preserve. And the Dayton Bluffs was one of those areas because it was of very high quality, at least botanically so. Fast forward, in 2008, a number of men, two men bought property there, and we're going to turn it into a subdivision, about 1,200 homes. And then when the real estate market tanked, it was bad for them, but it was great for nature because the land came up for sale. And the Conservation Foundation in Naperville purchased 253 acres of that land using private money. It is now leased as a park to the city of Ottawa for $1 a year. Both of those entities pump in cash, but we do most of the work. In 2014, the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission designated it as a land and water reserve, so it's protected in all times, in perpetuity. I couldn't say anything more without introducing the Conservation Foundation. They're a not-for-profit in Naperville, Illinois. As you see from their mission statement, they want to save land and save water, promote stewardship of our environment, which we all recognize as important. They are fully accredited, 4-star charity. All the money goes into nature work. This is their service territory. You don't have to worry, you're outside of the territory, but they cover about 8 counties, and as I say, they're located in Naperville, Illinois, and they have saved 36,000 acres, total of 200 parcels in that 8-county area, 47 conservation easements. So they've done a wonderful job, and we wouldn't be here without their purchasing the land that we steward now. So Kathy kind of asked about what habitats we have at the Dayton Bluffs, and we're very unique in that regard. We have about every habitat you would think you would want in a nature area. We have the high quality woodlands that I said that the Illinois natural areas identified in 1999 that should be preserved. We have about a mile of the Fox River and the bottomlands associated with that. We're working on restoring or creating a savanna. We have ravines and intermittent streams, and at one point we did a fish survey and found the mottled scallop, or mottled sculpin, which is state endangered or threatened. We have a reclaimed borrow pit. It's kind of a pond, so that's another habitat that we have. And then, as Barry mentioned, we have Native American burial mounds and a cholera/abandoned/pioneer cemetery that after 160 years of neglect are volunteer. That would be another source of another hour talk, but we can't go into that. But the last two you see are in green are what we're going to talk about tonight, the two habitat that we thought you'd be interested in. And the first one I'm going to talk about wetlands, and then Chris is going to join in and talk about our creation of a tallgrass prairie. So maybe a definition of wetlands for some of you would be helpful. Think of it as a habitat that's a transition between an aquatic and a terrestrial habitat. So it's partly aquatic, it's partly terrestrial. It must have one of the three of the following. It must periodically support wetland plants, and I'm not sure, but some of the plants on your list might be obligate wetland plants, but if they're obligate, that means they have to be or are usually in a wetland. If they're upland plants, they are almost always seen, they're almost not seen in a wetland, and in between you have different gradations. So in a wetland, you've got to have some obligate plants, and you're probably not going to have some upland plants in a wetland, and you'll see some of that mentioned later on. You also need to have hydric soil. Hydric soil is soil that doesn't have much free oxygen. So the plants that are considered wetland plants can live where there's not much oxygen. Their roots don't need the oxygen that other plants would need. And lastly, the soil is covered or saturated with water at least part of the growing season. In the case of our wetland, it's an ephemeral wetland. That means it's wet part of the year, the spring and the fall, and then in the summer it dries out. It's also known as a vernal pond or a wet meadow. That's what we are going to talk about here tonight. Why are wetlands important? This is probably redundant. A lot of you know this, but it helps to store water after floods. It helps to recharge the water table. The water percolates down, gets back into the water table, which we all need when we get our drinking water. It helps with pollution control. Wetlands act as a filter out chemicals, harmful chemicals. But maybe most importantly, and the reason we wanted to do this, 40% of Illinois' threatened and endangered species are wetland dependent. And they're important for both feeding and breeding. And then lastly, hunting and fishing depend upon wetlands. To talk about Illinois wetlands specifically, Illinois has lost more wetlands than any other state in the Union. Since 1818 settlement, 90% of Illinois wetlands, 7.6 million acres, have been destroyed. In 1984, the INAI initiated a program to identify and protect wetlands, and then Illinois enacted a law, the Interagency Wetlands Protection Act, to actually do something about it. Of all the wetland types, you know, on the ocean or the Atlantic, the seaboard, you'd have the Atlantic water, but you have lakes, reservoirs, ponds, marshes, rivers, streams, fens, bogs, swamps. We're going to talk about wet meadows or vernal ponds. I'm not going to go into detail, but we had visions of this in 2020, and it's taken us 3, 4, 5, 6 years to actually implement it. Here, we actually created 2 wetlands, and our wetlands are shallow. They're not a pond. They're about 12 inches deep, but you'll see that they're very effective in terms of attracting animals in just a minute. The 2 ponds together, or 2 wetlands together, are about 1.8 acres. 29 of our volunteers did most of the work of planning the wetlands, but we had assistance from a program called Mighty Acorns, where we take fifth graders from elementary school and they come out on buses and they work with us. And it's a delight to see their enthusiasm. And I wish I had a video to show them how they come squealing off the bus to come out and help us. And you'll see some photographs of the kind of work that they did. Cost of the excavation was up $15,000. Cost of the plugs was another $7,000. And we had delivery of the plugs before we were quite ready to start planting them. So we had to water them. By the way, we have no electricity and we have no source of water at the Dayton Bluffs. So how do we water plants? We go to the city to a hydrant and bring about 200 gallons out at a time and water the plants. It's hard work. I won't go into details. Pizzo Nursery provided most of the plugs. We got some more from Country Road Greenhouse. And this is the construction of the bowl itself. Again, think of it as a 12 to 18-inch depression that's going to fill periodically with water. When it was done, gives you an impression of what it looks like. I think that's Chris on the left there, isn't it? And then here's one of the two bowls. And then we graded some of the clay balls with a drag there. And then I'm going to show you some of the original plantings. First thing we did is there's a berm that holds the water in, and we put down seed and then erosion mats. Put that down with staples to keep the water from washing that seed away. And each of these berms has 1 or 2 or 3 depressions where the water can spill out so that we never get the water too high. And that's what we're doing here is we're planting plugs in that depression to make sure that that's sustained using that power auger. And here the whole berm now has been seeded and protected with this landscape fabric. Now here's the unfortunate part. So when you want to plant about 7,000 plugs, you'd like to do it in dry ground. We had a 2.1-inch rain which filled our bowl, and about the only thing you can plant would be rice. And so what we had to do, there's the bowl full of water. We got all these plugs and nowhere to put them. But the good news was the wildlife found us within weeks. We had frogs and tadpoles up to our elbows. Here's some more of the water in the wetland. This is what we had to do. We actually had to drain our wetlands to create a wetland. This is one of our volunteers with a trash pump pumping the water over the berm. And we're recording as the water recedes, and another frog appears. So we're happy about that. And then we see some different waterfowl like solitary sandpipers and rough-winged swallows. So we're heading in the right direction. This is one of the wetlands, an aerial view after the berm has been seeded, but before we've started planting the plugs in the bowl itself. And you can see that we talked about a transitional zone. This is certainly a transitional zone between a forest and a prairie. And the prairie is what Chris is going to talk about in about a minute. And so after we drained the water out, and of course then we went into drought, but at least the bowl was now dried out, and we start planting. I don't know if there's a pointer on here, but you can see some of the plugs have already been put in the ground. And here are volunteers, more volunteers planting the plugs, and we would try and position the various plants to where maybe a plant likes it wet, so we would find a more depressed area for that plant, whereas other plants that want it to be dry will find a higher area into the bowl. So there was a little bit of science and thought that goes into where you put the plants. This is where we had the Mighty Acorns come out and help us and work with our more senior volunteers. Our oldest volunteer was 84, and our youngest volunteer were these young children who were like 12 or 13 years old. It was quite a project having them come out. And here's our source of water. And here's a good example of where the kids were helping us plant the plugs. And more, and see where they're watering one plant to the next with a water. Our oldest volunteer is there on the left. And again, before we could get all the plants in the ground, we had to water them to maintain them before they were actually planted. And we're glad to see the cardinal flower actually bloomed while it was still in its flats. Winged loosestrife flowered soon after it was planted. Swamp milkweed, we were gratified to see that. And soon after, monarch butterflies appeared. Obedient plant was another one that flowered in the first year, and also monkey flower. Now, 2 years later, this is back in 2023 when we first did the project. 2 years later, we got a grant from a family, the Burt family, for another 600 plugs. The prairie wetland had pretty much been established, but we wanted to add some more diversity. So we added sneezeweed, bugleweed, loosestrife again, blue flag iris again, field mint, and monkey flower again. And here are some of our volunteers processing those plugs. Flag iris, planting them, and of course we have to water those as well. And again, bring water in from the city. And then I'm going to just show you a kind of a time lapse of the wetland for you to get a feel of the seasons of a wetland, a vernal pond. This is from 2024 after the first plantings. So we don't have vegetation throughout, but you can see a little bit of water. I think this is in the spring of 24 after the first plantings. Then things start to green up a little bit and we get more water in the spring and more vegetation greening up. There's some common milkweed, there's some black-eyed Susan, this swamp milkweed on the left, and then the trail. And again, you see the prairie on the left and the woodlands on the right. And as summer fades, you start to see browning up of the vegetation and then snow, and then we're back for another season. One of the things we wanted to do was a diversity study. So we put pins in the ground on the two wetlands. This is where the two wetlands are situated. And we put 4 pins on the one below and 5 above, and we marked those with pins and staples, and they're numbered. And Chris did this study on the first year. Now we're going to go back in 2 or 3 years and document how we're doing in terms of diversifying our plant population. And we used a high-resolution GPS transmitter from the city to identify, because you can't find those little pins after a few years without the help of a GPS system. And these are the pins. They're individually numbered pins and they're stapled into the ground. Here's the wetland in the spring of this year. You can see some plants are more prominent than others, but the bowl is full. This is the other wetland. And the denizens of our new habitat are numerous and very gratifying. I've talked to you about number of frogs, and Chris, do you agree that most of those have been seen there or not? Okay. Chris has done our frog survey. That would be a subject of another talk. And then the raccoons and the deer came. We could see their footprints even before the plants were put in the bowl, so they were using it to get water. Already mentioned the solitary sandpipers. This is the first year where we've seen ducks, and we think we saw blue-winged teal ducks, mallard ducks, and wood ducks. And I'll show you, and Canada geese, a lot of dragonflies. We'll show you some photographs of some of them in a minute. This is the blue-winged teal. This is a wood duck. We were thrilled to see him. A couple of mallards, the geese, and these are some references. So it's interesting that we saw geese a couple weeks ago when the bowl was full. Now we may not see them for a while because they really want the water to wade around in. So they'll be back in the fall. These are the main references, and I have them with me tonight. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions before Chris comes up and talks about prairie construction. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Did you bring in any extra soil when you began the
That's a good question. So what they did is, I should have pointed that out, they scraped the soil off, such as it was, and then after they created the bowl, they brought it back. But there was still a lot of clay on the surface, so it wasn't the best of soil, but I can see this year now, with the dying vegetation, there's a lot of muck on the top, so it's going to be a very good sort of soil eventually. But no, we didn't bring any soil in. And you might ask, well, why did you choose these two areas? It turns out that as we were creating the prairie, these were 2 wet areas already, but this kind of structured the process a little bit further. And I'm sure it's going to be more effective in attracting the waterfowl and insects and mammals and things. The frogs we mentioned, we haven't seen any turtles, we haven't seen any salamanders or any other herps, snakes or so on. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you do anything to like protect from like deer pressure or to protect from like deer pressure or like for the deer to not eat the plants when you...
Oh, the deer? No, we didn't. We haven't seen too much deer browse there. I think they're mainly just there for the water.
There is, it's just part of the process.
Yeah, and that's true. That some of this, like the ducks that are in there now, they're eating tadpoles, they're eating vegetation, so it's give and take. That's a good question.
This might not be your area of expertise, but I noticed on YouTube there was tons of videos about the Bluff area, and it seems like the community has really adopted the place. Is there some sort of technique you use to make the community very, very aware of it to generate that kind of response?
I wish I could tell you. I think we've attracted the right kind of volunteers. I mean, they've taken ownership of the property, and you'll see that if you come for the tour. There are people, we mow all the trails. We take great pride in keeping those nice and managing it. You know, there's some state parks around us that aren't managed as well because of limited funds. And we make sure that people don't see litter so they don't think that that's approved by us. If you don't see it, you don't leave it. But our volunteers, you know, in retirement, I started out working once a month. And then I went to like once a week, and now I'm out there probably several days a week, and there are other volunteers who feel the same way about the place. And I didn't mention it, but after being a volunteer for 3 years, I decided I wanted to know why I was doing what I was doing, and that's what prompted me to join on as an Illinois Extension Master Naturalist. Do any of you here Illinois Extension Master Naturalist? Okay, so you probably understand that. And I'm not an expert, but that program tells me what I don't know and how to find the answers, right? We're not experts, even though the name so implies. But yeah, we just have a bunch of great volunteers. We like to treat them well. We have a newsletter we send out once a month. They say that helps to engender loyalty. We have a series of talks like you have here. We had a gentleman come give a talk on falconry where he brought falcons into a room. That was a fascinating tale. Most of our speakers have been internal, but we know our volunteers want to know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and we've been happy to have great volunteer loyalty.
Do you have invasives in your wetland, and what do you do about them?
Yes. So again, that could be a long talk. When the farmer was farming these fields, these 100 acres that we've converted to prairie, they were plowing and disking and herbiciding every year. That kept the cottonwoods in check. Cottonwoods, we don't mind them being down in the river or in the ravines, but the cottonwoods, if you didn't know this, they can drop 48 million seed. One mature cottonwood can drop 48 million seed in 1 year. So once the farmer was done with these bare fields, that seed bank was just unbelievable. And we have been struggling with cottonwood sprouts for 10 years. And I thought we had them last year, and now in the spring, they're back in our prairie, but they're also obviously going to be back in the wetlands. And so when the wetlands dry out, we'll get in there with herbicide and loppers. We've tried, that's the best example I can give you. We've tried fire, mowing, and herbicide, and it's very labor intensive, the herbicide is. We've knocked them down, but it's going to be an ongoing problem, especially in the wetland. And we don't want to let the wetland turn into a forest any more than we want to let the prairie turn into a forest. So we're after them. I don't think we've seen any others. We see some willows.
With some, willow we've had, a couple random cactus show up. We haven't had really canary grass yet.
Or phragmites, yeah.
Phragmites, as soon as we start to see them, I mean, the wetlands are small enough that we can get in there and we can identify them and control them, before anything gets out of control.
They're not that big. The cattails, they take a cotton glove over a rubber glove and dip in the herbicide and just hand strip and hand apply the herbicide. Did that answer your question? Or?
Yes.
Yeah. But the woodlands, we're constantly doing garlic mustard, buckthorn, honeysuckle. Those are the big ones. And I could talk to you afterward about all the techniques. Yeah. Questions? If you have more at the end, you can come back to me. Otherwise, I'll have Chris come up and talk about our seed program.
How's that working? Am I on there? Oh, good. Can you give me your thingy? No, this thingy. Okay. All right, seed collection, Dayton Bluffs. Hi, everyone, I'm Chris. I've been volunteering at Dayton Bluffs for 5 or 6 years now, I believe. It was actually a funny story. I was actually training for a backpacking trip once, and I was walking Dayton Bluffs because there's miles of trails. You can get a lot of good experience up and down, and happened to run into one of the old school volunteers at an area that, so those of you come out and maybe experience, called Heart Attack Hill. And there's a barge rope that goes down this really steep hill, and I just happened to run into him. It's someone I knew from before volunteering, and I was asking him about, like, oh, do you have to use the rope to get up? And he goes, oh, I put that rope in. What are you talking about? You just go around the forest preserve? You're just like putting ropes up? Like, what are you talking? So he told me about the volunteer process, and I went out the next Saturday, and that's it from there. It was all over. Once I found out what was going on there, because I liked, everything with the outdoors was just great. Let's see how we're working here. Okay, so we're going to talk a little about seed collection and kind of what we do pretty much throughout the whole year at Dayton Bluffs. I actually just started collecting seed this past weekend. It was just a random thing. Happened to see some pussy toes in the woods that was going to seed, so grabbed some of those. So here's kind of like a little overview of our seed process. There's a bunch of us volunteers who are outside of our kind of our seed shed, a bunch of our buckets and sleds and kind of stuff that we've collected throughout the year so far. And here's our seed processing day. We have a community building in Ottawa. They allow us to come in and kind of finish processing the last of our seeds and make our seed mixes, which we then redistribute back on site at Dayton Bluffs in the winter. Which we here we have in the winter. So here we are with our buckets of our pre-made seed mixes that we kind of, we work with our site biologist, Renee, and myself, and we kind of design seeds that we've collected at different areas of Dayton Bluffs, and we decide where we want to redistribute those. So a good example is our wetlands at Dayton Bluffs. We've collected seeds from our wetlands. We remix the seeds back into a mix so that we can then reapply back into the wetlands or other areas of Dayton Bluffs that could benefit from, say, getting some wetland seeds like around the pond that we have at Dayton Bluffs. Oh, and you know why? So we'll go back. So in the snow, we want to put our seeds out in the snow in the wintertime. This allows your native seed to have to do a process called cold stratifying. So you want to kind of get the seeds that has to break their dormancy. So by laying in the snow for 60 or 90 days, that allow them to get that cold and wet. And so then after the seeds go through that dormancy process, once it starts warming up, it triggers the seed. Hey, I've gone through wintertime. It's safe for me to start to germinate now without being frozen to death and dying. Reference material, seed collection guide. So it's kind of little, what was this one for? Just collection guide. Yeah. Just some more seed collection. There's a little guide for seed collection dates, one the little reference guide, which this seems to be changing earlier and earlier with climate change. We're finding that we're not collecting these seeds later in the year. We're starting to collect them sometimes 2 or 3 weeks earlier than our local guides. Little phenology. This kind of gives your best percentage of viable seed to collect. So each seed is going to kind of have its your maximum viability of seed that you can collect. Well, so if you collected 2, or if you're going to collect something early, you're only going to get a couple percentage of seed that could be viable. And if you wait too long, a lot of seeds will have dropped on the ground and you lose them. So there's every seed is going to have its peak window to get your most amount of viable seeds. Here's hardiness zones. Those are familiar with your gardening and that. Seed types. So all of our native seeds all have like different types. So we'll go through the your ballistic capsules. Those are the ones that kind of get, those are familiar with like say jewelweed or wild geraniums. They're going to have like almost an explosive mechanism that propels the seed away from the parent plant. Jewelweed is a good example. They'll have the little pod, and they're also called touch me not for a reason. As soon as you touch that little pod, it's going to boom, explode, and shoot the little seeds out like that. Fluffy seeds, probably one of the most common ones. Think of dandelions, your goldenrods, your asters. They're going to have all those seeds that are just carried away by the wind. Sometimes those can be tricky to collect, especially if you have a windy day coming up. You could be like, okay, I'm going to go collect Saturday, and you have 30-mile-per-hour winds on a Friday, and then you go out Saturday, and where'd all my seeds go? So you got to watch those fluffy seeds. You're going to go get them. They can typically, you can just kind of be collected. You can just kind of grab them, and you can cut them off at the top of the plant, then process more controlled environment, separate the seeds. Milkweeds, familiar with milkweeds? They got pods that crack, split open, and then your seeds are also wind dispersed there as well. Tip for that, Dave, what's noted here? You can put a rubber band on the unripe pods to the pod. The seeds will develop. And then as it keeps the pod from cracking open and the seeds get dispersed away. There's also, you can use like little mesh bags. I know folks that'll have a garden, you can put those on to keep insects off. You can use these same mesh bags. I have like a nice little cinch on the bottom. You put those over milkweeds and they work great. I used them last year in a couple of types of milkweeds. And then you just kind of have to, it helps if you kind of like attach it to the plant. Otherwise, if the pod falls off, your bag falls on the ground or getting blown away. Then you got to search for your bag. Your shakers, a good example of this would be like your baptisias, your indigos. They kind of just form like nice pods. And like I said, mama's boy, those seeds means they kind of like to stay on with the plant. And you can kind of, if you miss them one day, they'll probably still be there in a week or 2 weeks. Even throughout the whole winter, you could still go up to some of these pods and the seeds will still be intact. Second type. Shakers, which we did talk about. Beaks, they're kind of capsules that will split open, and then your seeds will be inside. A good one is this is the like penstemon, or what's a common name for penstemon? Yeah, I've got Thank you. So those they're kind of tough if you collect those to crack them open to get the seeds. I know when we're processing at Dayton Bluffs, we have to use almost like a little rolling pin and roll it and crack and smash these dried seed heads open to get the seeds out. If they're outside in nature for long, eventually they will open up on their own, and then the seeds kind of just can pour out of there. Your cone heads, you got your purple cone head, purple coneflower, yellow coneflower. Those are kind of more of like a tougher dried seed head there, and a lot of those take a lot of work to kind of break those apart to get the seeds out of there. Crumbly cone heads, that would be your yellow coneflower, your retivita. Those break apart relatively easy when they're ready to be have the seeds extracted. Number 3, shattering seeds. Let's see, what's a good example? Follow one beige. They don't move too far. Hitchhikers. That's going to be your weedy ones, your burdocks. Our native ones would be like your tick trefoils. Those are very sticky, and as you kind of walk by, especially when we're doing a lot of work at Dayton Bluffs out in the Prairie, when we're collecting seed, volunteers love collecting that one because it just collects itself all over you from here down to there. And it's a very lengthy process removing those seeds from your clothes. All right, general guidelines. We want to harvest the seed when they're mature. So we don't want to get them too early when they could still be green and the seeds are not mature. You will be, collecting seeds that aren't ready, and it's kind of, you're doing more damage than harm. You want to wait till the seeds are mature when you collect them. Store them when they're dry. A 1% increase in seed moisture can half your longevity of your seed in storage, increasing mold. There's nothing more distressing than you've done all this work to collect your seeds, and then you store them away somewhere, and you go to take them out, and they've all molded on you because you put them away wet. And then all that work and all those seeds, the mold, then they're just gone. Store in waterproof containers once they're dry. This will prevent the seeds from absorbing moisture before they're ready. Store with some ambient temperature and humidity is less than 100. So that means that like you add your temperature, and if you're hitting humidity, you want to keep that under 100. So if you store them where it's 70 degrees, and if your humidity is, you know, over 30%, well, now you're over that 100 mark. So you want to store them cool and dry to get the best longevity out of your seeds while you're waiting to, you know, throw them out for the cold stratifying process. And then an increase of 10 degrees Fahrenheit in storage can half your shelf life of seed. So that's another thing. As soon as you collect them, get them dry, store them in a waterproof container, and get them somewhere cold. All right. Seed when they're ready. So grasses, sedges, forbs, and then woodland forbs. So our grasses. So here's one of our main grasses you can find in the woodlands. This is bottlebrush grass. As you can see from the picture down here, if you look at bottlebrush grass from the top, it looks like, you know, bottle that you use to, you know, brush you clean your bottles with. It's kind of self-explanatory when you see it. Those are very easy seed to collect. When they're brown and they're ready, you just can lightly just grab and run your hand up. The seeds will just fall off in your hand. Side oats grandma. This is a nice short grass prairie. You know, it's a neat little grass here. All the seeds kind of form off to one side, as you can see on the left here. They just kind of like dangle down there. Another easy one to collect. Another thing, once they're ready, you just get a little pressure up the stem, and then the seeds will fall right off in your hand. Virginia wild rye. This is one of our most common ryes that we'll find. This one's going to be found in your woodland edges and stuff like that. It's almost like an oats. It's a kind of a thicker seed, like the other grasses, like all the grasses. You just kind of run your hand up to the top there to collect, and they'll just, you know, when they're ready, they just come right off. You just want to apply, you know, just a little pressure, and if they're not coming off, they're not ready. Canada wild rye. This is one you can see. This is another really common one, and we have this in prairies. We have this in our woodland edges as well. This is you can see the long awns coming up of each seed. Like that. These help it get carried away in the wind. Like I said, this being a grass, another easy one to collect with minimal processing. Pretty much you collect it and you have pure seed in your hand ready to go. Little blue stem, nice little another short grass prairie plant here. These, as they start to mature, you'll see the seeds start to get more and more fluffy, and they'll get ready to get carried away by the wind. These are a little more labor intensive to collect. As you go to collect them, you may start to lose some, and they'll start to lose some as you're collecting them. So they're a little tougher to collect, but a worthwhile grass to have in a prairie. Switchgrass, this is almost like, this has a little tiny seed, but they get these large seed heads up on top. The grass can get, you know, up to 6 feet tall out in the prairie, but they give a really nice, easy grass. It's a nice little round little seed to collect. Now our sedges and rushes. Sedges, we have over 100 species of sedge in Illinois, so identifying sedges it's tough. Yeah. So what's the one? Brown fox sedge. So this is one of our most common sedges you can find. You can find this in like wet prairies, you know, even your music prairies. This can be found we have on the edge of our wetlands as well. They tolerate from like that music soil, like kind of medium wet, they can tolerate being somewhat wetter. And, you know, collecting sedges actually will start getting ready here to collect probably in the next couple weeks. Believe it or not, you can actually sedge seeds when they're ready to collect. Like these are nice and brown. If you just kind of lightly rub your hand up those, they'll just almost crumble in your hand. And then you're like, oh, seeds are ready. And they don't necessarily have to be brown. They could still be green. As long as they're breaking off and they're falling off in your hand, the seeds will be ready to go. Nodding bulrush, this is common. We do have this one in our wetland as well. This is another plant more for your wetlands or wetter prairies. The seeds are on these long, little dangly little jobs there, and the seeds are kind of more of a little fluffy thing. The seeds are incredibly small with these, so it's okay if you have like extra chaff if you're collecting that. If you have like little extra bits, it's okay. Gives you some weight for your seed when you're dispersing. Soft rush here, you can see these are even smaller seeds. These seeds are incredibly small. If you look on the top right with the millimeters there, I mean, these are almost like a dust. these can almost just get lost in even like the fingerprints and the grooves of your hand. And those seeds are enclosed in these little tiny little capsules in the middle picture there. So once those will break open, you'll have the little tiny little seeds that start coming out of there, and those will be dispersed through like rain. So a raindrop hits that and it helps just to help splash the seeds away. Now some prairie forbs, which we all want to know about. Ohio spiderwort. These just, now, if you look on the side there, it says June 22nd, started to flower. These just started flowering this week at Dayton Bluffs. So like we said, when you have these slides where it's like, oh, they're starting to flower. No, stuff's starting to get a lot earlier. We're almost a month ahead of schedule. We had, oh, you know, nice wet spring. We had some warmer temps, so things are moving along a lot quicker. Spiderwort, each flower is only open for one single day. So, but you can see each flower head has multiple like little flowers on it. And so collecting seed, which is going to be pictured on the top right corner there, they almost look like a fossil of some kind, but they're this the most bizarre looking seed. Collecting those seeds is tough because with each flower, you know, throughout, you know, one flower a day, that means the seeds are going to be ready at all different times. You're not going to have one flower with all the seeds. So when we try to collect spiderwort, we sometimes might try to get that sweet spot where we can go up and, okay, we'll get, you know, 70% of all the seeds are still in the flower. We may lose some. So we're kind of hit or miss when we collect our spiderwort. But when most of it's all dried up, that's when we'll go and we cut them and then we shake them and they just kind of fall right out of there. Golden Alexander. This is probably one of the easiest prairie forbs to collect seeds from. Those just started blooming now as well. They get this nice, beautiful flower. On the left side, it's nice yellow. And then the seed, picture up on the top right there, pretty much all you're left when the flower is done, you just have this envelope on top there, and it's just full of seeds all on the top with very minimal, you know, excess, you know, chaff from any extra flower parts. Super easy to collect. Purple coneflower. This is one of those that takes some work to try to get the seeds out. I know we usually run them through a chipper shredder like you do with like small sticks and leaves. This helps chop up the flower head and get those seeds out, which you can see on the right side there. Otherwise, if you try to just get them out by hand, that's a lot of work. And it can be painful on the fingertips. So we use a chipper shredder. We just run them all through a whole yard waste bag, and you just have all the seeds kind of break up through there. And we try to process some of the small bits of flower, like if they're still holding on to seeds. That's when we have our seed work day in the late fall, when we'll try to process and try to get every last seed out of the flower head. Black-eyed Susan is a common one. Everyone probably has these in their flower beds. It's kind of just a little cone full of flower, the dried flower like that, and then each little long seed on the right side, they're just kind of in each little, you know, in the flowers there. Wild bergamot, or Monarda is a scientific name. These are those nice, pretty purple pink flowers. And if you see in the top middle there, if you're looking down, you can see it's just full of a bunch of tubes. And inside each tube, once it dries up, that's where the seeds are going to be inside. So you see on the right side there, the seeds are these nice little, you know, little ovals like that. And just harvest Monarda, it's pretty simple with bergamot. If you turn it upside down when it's dried, the seeds literally can just like fall right out in your hand. That's an easy one.
Leaves can be steeped in hot water and make tea. In fact, it's a source of Earl Grey tea.
Culver's root. This is a nice one of the prairie. It's a nice white flower. It's going to get these long brown spikes, as you can see here, once the flower is done and ready to collect seed. When they turn brown, it means it's good. Should be good to go to collect. And we just cut the whole seed heads off like that. And if you just kind of rub them like this, the seeds, very similar to the wild bergamot, they just drop right out of there. But there's a lot of seeds for Culver's root. They're pretty small. Pale purple coneflower. This is a little more common for our prairies, for our area. This has like more longer, slender leaves, similar color to purple coneflower, and the exact same process to remove the seeds. We just run the seed heads through a chipper shredder, and see the seeds look almost identical. Prairie petunia. This is one that kind of has one of those explosive mechanisms. So as the seed head, which you see in the middle slide there, it's just this long, this guy right here. So the seeds are kind of enclosed in that capsule, and when it's ready, the capsules kind of explode and they'll shoot the little seeds out, which are the round little discs on the right side. And they shoot out pretty far. Prairie blazing star, like all of our blazing stars, they form these, beautiful pink flowers on stalks like that. When the seeds are ready for those, you'll see on the left side there, you're just going to get this long stalk of just fuzzy, almost looks kind of like a cattail when it's getting all fluffy. But all the seeds, they're just wind dispersed on there. So we go to collect that. There's two different methods. We either can carefully cut the whole seed head off and put it in a bag, or if you can strip it, you can just kind of come to the bottom and just strip it up, and you have a whole handful of fluffy seeds there. Gray-headed coneflower, or yellow coneflower is another common name. This is an easy one to also. This is one of the ones, those crumbly heads. So if you look in the middle slide there, you'll see those are the dried flower heads once the flowers are done. And pretty much the seeds are all just inside there. And if they just crumble, and they smell pretty good too. They just crumble apart and the seeds just come out there, which is the long little black ones on the right side there. Foxglove beer tongue or any of the penstemons, these are the ones we have to use a roller to break apart those seed head, those flowers. So you see in the middle there, that's the brown there when the flower's all done and you have your seeds inside there. Those hold on to seeds for quite a while. I think we can even go out in the prairie in February and we'll still find last year's, beer tongues, the fencemen's there, and they'll still have seeds in them. Common mountain mint. This is another easy one. This is very similar to Monarda. You'll see here in the top middle slide there, if you look down, it's another similar thing we have, just like the little open tubes. And the seeds are all just enclosed there. That's another easy one. Once it dries, another thing, you just tip it over and the seeds can just pour right out of there. Royal catchfly. Now at Dayton Bluffs, this is one of our main success plants. We started with just, I think, a couple of plants that showed up. But as you can see, it has that brilliant red color, very similar to, the cardinal flower that you could have in wetlands. We now have probably hundreds of these plants at Dayton Bluffs through us collecting and redistributing into other areas. These are an easy one to collect too. When they're done, you see on the right side, there's the, more like the tan little capsule. And pretty much you just collect those. You can tip those upside down. Same thing, the seeds just pour right out of there. We got to try to get those before it gets too windy, otherwise the wind blows them and then because it'll just spit like an open cup and just sits there and you can lose them all. Common ironweed, another wind dispersed seed there. So we kind of, you wait till you start to see the dried flower heads start to open back up, kind of like when the dandelion would open. And that lets us know, hey, the seeds are getting ready. We want to get them before the wind blows them away. Another beautiful purple flower for the prairie with that one. Allegheny monkey flower. This is a plant we've added into our wetlands. It produces a lot of flowers on one singular plant, kind of a nice purplish flower, but it has probably the smallest seeds, I believe, I've seen us collect. I believe in 1 ounce can have 2.3 million seeds in an ounce. That's a lot of seeds. And that stuff, if you're in a nursery setting and you're growing, you keep your monkey flower away from everything else that you're growing, because you get drops of water will splash the monkey flower out into all of your surrounding flats. Rough blazing star, like our other prairie blazing star, this is more of a like a drier prairie. So same way to collect, you'll have just kind of run your hand up the stalk there, and you can just hand glean the seeds from the stalk. Cup plant. This is one of the taller prairie plants you can get. These can get, I've seen them up to like 8 feet tall. They're a very beneficial plant with like more of your wetter prairies around your wetlands. Their seeds actually will cup around the stem and they will hold water in there. So it's a good source of water for birds and other animals. Their seed heads, you see in the bottom right, there are these large dried up flower heads, and the seeds are pretty big. As you see in the top right, think of like, I don't know, like one of your fingernails is one of those seeds. So quite the opposite from what monkey flower is. Round-headed bush clover. This is a beneficial plant for your prairie as well. Flowers aren't that showy. They're kind of like a brownish maroon color. But you see here, the seed head is going to be that dried brown. And then each little seed is going to be, you see on the right side there, it's kind of like a roundish flat disc. But they're, being a legume, they help, fix nitrogen into the soil, beneficial, and they provide a lot of food for birds. Swamp milkweed. Pretty much all the milkweeds are very similar. You're going to have that capsule. So if you want to collect your swamp milkweed, this could be more where it's like a wetter environment. We have it in our wetlands at Dayton Bluffs. You can either remove the fluff from the seeds, so you have just your seeds instead of a bunch of fluff floating around your bedroom. So it's kind of, to collect that, if you can kind of like crack the pod open a little, and there's a special technique to kind of just run your thumbnail along there. You can just pull the seeds out and separate it from all the fluff, so you have less of a mess. Cardinal flower. This is one of the, our success stories in our wetlands at Dayton Bluffs as well. Nice, beautiful, brilliant red flower like the royal catchfly. This also gets a tiny, small little seed, and you can see in the middle slide here, just little tiny capsules where the flowers were, and they'll hold those little seeds inside there. So you want to be careful when you're collecting that, so you're not collecting them too early, otherwise your seeds will not be viable. And you can kind of see there's a little arrow pointing. It kind of lets you know the top of the capsule kind of opens up a little bit. And so that's say, hey, those seeds are ready to be collected. Obedient plant. This is another one we have in our wetlands as well and along the edge of the wetland. Beautiful pink flower. And these are another easy one to collect seeds. You'll get these nice little, where the flowers, they have these nice stalks, and you can just kind of collect, and you just break them apart, and the seeds just come pouring out right out of there. Pretty easy one. Partridge pea. This is an annual. Like most of our other prairie plants and native plants we talked about, they're all going to be perennial, so they'll come back year after year. Partridge pea is only an annual. Now these guys are fun because you see in the bottom right, little like bean pod, little capsules, and the seeds are inside. These guys, once they're also an explosive pod, so if you come up to them and they'll start splitting, they'll just explode and they'll just launch the seeds out. So collecting those is fun because you got to get them when they're brown, and before they start, they'll actually kind of like twist and curl like this and launch like that. Pasture thistle, we threw this one on here. This is actually one of our native thistles we have in our prairies. Also very beneficial for your butterflies and other pollinators. We collect and distribute this at Dayton Bluffs because it is a native thistle, and it is a remnant plant for this. I don't believe they were added with the original mix, so we had these kind of show up, which was a nice surprise. But these are tough because it is a thistle. They are, have the spines on them. So we kind of wait till they're dried, and then we'll just kind of go with some clippers, and we'll just clip off, the flowers when they're have the seeds ready. Sneezeweed. They actually used to use this as a snuff, I believe in the late 1800s, early 1900s. That's its name. These will produce a small little flower head you'll see in the middle there when those are dried up, but it's a nice, beautiful yellow flower. We have quite a lot of this in our wetlands. They do well. They gave us a lot of seeds last year, and they can kind of get big and nice bushy plant. These are very similar to like the graded coneflower. Once the flower heads are dry, we just collect them, and they just crumble right up. Easy one to collect. Butterfly milkweed, it's like our other milkweeds, but this is an orange flower. So this is nice to have in a prairie. It gives you a nice different splash of color, being orange and not the typical purples and pinks. But like the other milkweeds, and they'll just get this longer, skinnier pod instead of like a big fat pod. And collecting that, just like the other ones, you can either put like a bag or rubber band on it, and then you can kind of strip the seeds from the fluff. New England aster, this kind of can apply to all our asters, but New England aster is one of our most common native asters. They're a nice purple ray flower with a little yellow center. And to collect the seeds for that, we just, once the seeds the seed heads start getting fluffy and start opening up, we could just go and collect those. Hemp dogbane. This is kind of like a milkweed, but it's not a milkweed. But they do produce long cylindrical pods, very similar to milkweed, and they kind of spiral open like that. But they have also wind dispersed seeds, and they're very similar to a milkweed. Showy goldenrod. This is probably one of our nicer goldenrods. It gets a nice, almost like a Christmas tree-like plume of like beautiful yellow flowers. And like the rest of the, wind dispersed flowers, once the seeds start, getting all fluffy and getting ready to get wind dispersed, then we go after those. We can actually collect those, I believe, for a good 2 or 3 weeks at Dayton Bluffs, because they hold on to the seeds for quite a while. Woodland forbs, probably the most challenging of seeds to try to collect. I was looking at your plant list of seeds, and there's some awesome woodland plants that I am surprised are in flats available for sale. So get those if you're able to. Hairy Sweet Cicely. This is a neat little, we have a lot of these in our woods at Dayton Bluffs. They get these, you can see on the right side, that these long kind of pointy like seeds. We'll collect some of those, and they'll kind of like hitch on your pants, your clothes a little bit. Smooth Sweet Cicely, also it's another very similar way with the seeds. They kind of will latch on you a little bit, but not to where you're gonna have your pants full of them. Purple and sweet Joe Pye weed. We actually have, there's several different species of Joe Pye weed, but two of these, one of these we kind of have in a prairie, the other one is good for like in your wetlands there. And like the other, and it's another wind dispersed seed. So once those, those beautiful purple flowers, once they start to be done and they dry up, the seeds will be ready once they start opening up and being fluffy again. Heartleaf skullcap. This is in our remnant woodlands at Dayton Bluffs. This is a high quality woodland plant. As you can kind of see, the flowers aren't too much to look at, but the way that they have their seeds, if you see the top photo up there, they're almost just like a little cup with a little lid on it. And then once that lid opens up, there's only gonna be a handful of seeds inside there. So collecting that one is tough. One, we have to find where the plants are and then try to get the seeds before they pop open and lose the seeds. Now with all these plants, when you're out collecting seeds, you don't want to over harvest. You don't want to collect like all of the seeds. If you're in your own controlled area, like say your own garden at home or your own prairie, you can collect what you want. Out at Dayton Bluffs, when we have plants like this, being it's a remnant plant, we did not introduce it into the woodlands there. It's been there, which is part of the reason why Dayton Bluffs was protected. We collect a small amount of this, even at all. And then what we'll do is we collect, like say from this plant, we know it's for the woodlands. We'll either redistribute it right away in an area where we're at. I don't think we will create a woodland mix with ones like this. We kind of take them and we may go 50 or 100 feet away and just kind of sprinkle them around there to help distribute the population more locally. Questions? Any questions about any of the native plants or seed collection?
I wanted to add a couple things that occurred for me. One is this rule of temperature versus humidity, because we don't have air conditioning out there, so our seed is exposed to that all the time. Sorry about that. So that temperature and humidity over 100, we violate that a lot because we store our seed outside.
I think some of the more high risk, or I guess you could say like valuable seeds or higher quality seeds, like some of us, we will take them home and put them in a nice packaging, like put them in our fridge, because like we don't want to lose.
One other thing, we're obligated to get seed that's locally sourced, so we have to get it within the 90-mile radius. So people wanting to bring in a seed from Iowa or Wisconsin, we can't accept it because we're constrained by our agreement with the IDNR. Off-site seed, we're very lucky. Chris's work involves driving how many miles a week? So he keeps his eye open for the ditches and the river edges and brings seed. It's off-site, but it's within the 90-mile limit. So we've gotten a lot of seed from Chris.
I'll say last year,
much to his credit.
Yeah, last year I set a goal for myself to collect 100 different species of native seeds. I almost doubled that. I got 190 species of seeds collected last year. They were all locally sourced from LaSalle County.
So, you know, the original Prairie probably had 200 to 300 different seed, very diverse. We're trying to get there, but we got a ways to go. Another controversy is fire versus seed collection. If you do prescribed fire, you're going to lose some seed that's still standing. But on the other hand, fire is important to the ecology of your place. The other thing is that the seed we've collected that we've thrown on the ground on the snow, hopefully it gets to the ground and it doesn't burn up in those areas that we've burned. Another thing is there's three types of prairies in the Midwest. We're the tallgrass prairie. So the pioneers driving through Illinois 200 years ago, the grasses were up and above them and their horses.
Yep.
Then if you go west, in the shadow of the rain shadow in the Rockies, they have the shortgrass prairie, and in between is mixed. The last point I wanted to make is that these red flowers are interesting. A lot of the insects don't see the red spectrum. They're shifted more to the ultraviolet. So that's why you don't see a lot of red in the native prairie. Those are going to be pollinated by hummingbirds more so than butterflies and so on. So any other questions for Chris? Sorry to interrupt.
Any other questions? Yes, in the back.
What are some of your scarcer species?
That we have at Dayton Bluffs, or just that, say, seeds of scarcer species at Dayton Bluffs. So there's a scale of conservatism where every plant is assigned a number 0 through 10. So we have several species that are a 10. Those would be like your higher quality. We have Great St. John's wort, which is actually only a handful of plants that we discovered only last year growing along the Fox River, which we've successfully collected seeds from, and we added them actually into our mix to distribute to other areas on site. In our woodlands, there's a lot more in the woodlands that we have. There's American spikenard in our woods, which is classified as a 10. It's surprising that it's not a shrub, considering how tall it can get to be, about maybe 4 feet tall, and produces lots of clusters of berries on it. Some of our more rare plants that maybe not be a 10, we have yellow stargrass. It's kind of a lot of these plants are going to be in our woods because it's a high quality remnant woodland. So there's yellow stargrass. We have violet wood sorrel out there, Michigan lily. What's what? Oh, there you go. Conservatism matrix. There you go. So here's for all of Dayton Bluffs, kind of like the FQ, different numbers all calculated together. I should say one of our highlights. For those that come out to the hike, Dayton Bluffs does have the grand champion red mulberry tree on site, which is also a 10. Red mulberry is vastly different than the white mulberry, which is from China. Red mulberry is our native mulberry tree. They are under a lot of threat, but we have the largest one in the state of Illinois. Thank you. What else we got on here? Or is that just that? So it talks about the different, so there's like 46 trees we found, 21 shrubs, 8 vines, 253 forbs, 32 grasses, 23 sedges. A lot of these numbers are going to change because now we do have rushes. It seems like every year we seem to be finding new plants that are in the woods. We just found wild hyacinth, I think, last week, which we didn't know was there, which is surprising.
We have Cecil Trillium, which is
Cecil Trillium, yeah. Yeah, and I believe Dave did you did a plants of concern study on the Bishop's Cap last year or 2 years ago. Just kind of monitor the population, how many we do have. So there's a lot of different studies that we're doing at Dayton Bluffs. We do find orchids every now and then. We're like, oh, an orchid will pop up, and then we look for it the next subsequent years, and we don't find it again. We're like, where did it go? Good question. Any question?
Yeah. Do you have any literature or publication of or listing of all of the things you've been talking about on the seeds and anything? How to collect the seeds?
To how to collect the seed, I know there's a lot of information. Back middle section.
The Field Museum of Chicago has guides And if you just look up guides and it breaks it down, it's got frogs and anything you would want. And most of those slides were taken directly from the Lake County seed guide, and you'd find all that there. And I'd be glad to help you more if you want to take my number and call me later, but all that stuff came from there.
Once you get started and you start collecting like seeds from like native plants, it gets broken down pretty easy. There's only like 4 or 5 different ways to get them.
So the dates shown on the slides were from the Field Museum dates rather than your specific site?
One of them, I think Cardinal or Catchfly, I did, but those are from the Field Museum, and I quoted that. I gave reference to that in the
I'm sure
slideshow.
that's
the Field Museum guides.
Old information because we've seen a lot of stuff. It's flowers flowering earlier.
But Lake County specifically did all that. And one of their volunteers took all these photographs of those tiny little seeds and all the plants. But the Catchfly I did, but I copied that and gave credit to them. Anybody can get that. It's on the Field Museum website.
Right. Any other questions about prairies or seeds, wetlands? Okay. Turn it over. All right, thank you.
Everybody, thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow night at the Extraordinary Caterpillar.